Hello, everyone. This is Mondo Banchero for Mondo's World, and you're listening to it on Rainier Avenue Radio. And today we're on location in Genesee Park, talking to my friend Dennis about something that is really bothering him in this city as well as parts of the country, and that's homelessness. So, how are you doing today, Dennis?
Well, Mondo, I'm a little chilly out here. We're sitting out here in a Saturday afternoon. I'm zipping up my jacket as we speak.
Uh huh.
But I'm glad to be outside and glad to be talking with you. And
Yeah.
I want to start
Okay.
my answering your question by saying that I'm not an expert.
Okay.
I'm just a person like anyone listening out there who's interested in homelessness and
Right.
helping people who are homeless and doing anything I can to help.
I don't believe I did. I don't believe I implied that you were an
No,
expert,
I
but
didn't want to say that for you. I
okay.
wanted to say that to give myself a
Okay.
little less credibility than people might start with
Yeah.
assuming that I might be some sort of expert
Right.
because I
Right.
don't work in the field or anything.
R-
But that being said,
r-
what I am doing and interested in is helping people, and
Yeah.
I'm part of a group that actually got together in the Seattle neighborhood and helped a person get a house.
Oh.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about that experience. I also, since we're in the age of coronavirus,
Oh
I
yes.
wanted to
There's
mention
that
that,
going on.
and that we're talking about homelessness,
Yeah.
that I wanted to talk a little bit about people imagining how difficult that could be, having those two things happening, both homeless and to have the danger of having coronavirus.
Right. And I just want to say that whether you have a home or not, the coronavirus is affecting all of us. It's affecting me. It's affecting people who just like to go out and take walks. Imagine what it is like for people that don't have somewhere to go and don't have anywhere that they can go really to be warm right now because you can't be around a lot of people in gatherings because they're afraid you're going to get it. So it's good to, talk about it and explain what it's like for those that aren't fortunate enough to have a roof over their head. So
Well, one thing I can say in response to that, Mondo, is uh, that you can imagine, you and I can both imagine, if we were outside every day, how hard it would be to do the basic precautions of keeping your hands washed, for
right,
example.
right,
Um, First of all, hot water. And
exactly.
how are you going to heat the water, and where's the water coming from,
Yeah,
and then just having access to something like hand sanitizer, or
right,
in some cities like San Francisco and a few other cities, for a long time now they've been providing that basic necessity to people, a way to clean their hands and basic toiletry.
right.
And unfortunately in Seattle that's not been true.
Yeah,
What Seattle has been doing to address the problem of hygiene in homeless camps is to move them toward shelters and
right.
places where they can wash their hands. But
You're right,
if you look at the number of toilets that exist in Seattle that are available to the public, I think there are six. And
right.
of those six, there are only three where there's running water. And
Exactly.
you take all the people in downtown Seattle and you put them in six toilets, three that you're going to exercise hygiene with, and
Right.
you've got tremendous problems keeping us all safe by having basic hygiene. So,
And you might feel that the homeless, when you think of homeless, the homeless is people that are talking to themselves, talking about somebody from another planet, or somebody that they think is right there, but they're not there. Um, but sometimes there are people that have children and families that that have everything mentally going correctly, but they just don't have the ability to pay rent for a home. So not everybody is, what's the proper word? Not everybody who's homeless has mental issues.
Very true.
Somebody could be there, and they could be like a well-educated person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the money to pay for a house. So not everybody is mentally ill that's out there.
But can encounter, for example, a
Yeah.
medical problem.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden they don't have the money to pay, and then they lose their house, and
Right.
then they lose the ability to work, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of things. In fact, something about it could be you or I very easily. A lot of people are, especially right now, because we just think of all of the people who are facing, who have been working, who don't have a job.
Right.
Suddenly, the people aren't eating out anymore, and we aren't going to sporting events. and
Right.
all the jobs that are dependent on those jobs,
Right.
not just the teams, but all the people who serve
Exactly.
and clean up and take
I
care
know,
of people.
I know of a couple of restaurants. I can't tell you the names of them, but they're fancier type restaurants where sometimes you might need a tie or a sweater to look presentable. But those people, because nobody's able to come, because of this coronavirus, nobody is able to come to those restaurants. So those people have had to shut down their businesses because they have no one coming to their businesses.
Yes.
I know of a guy, I heard a story about a gentleman who has 14 to 21 restaurants, as far as I know, and he had to shut like 14 or maybe all of them down because nobody could go because they didn't have the money or the time to spend on that because they're so concerned about not getting the virus. So pretty much ruins things for a lot of people.
And especially people who are on the front lines of living
Yeah.
marginally without a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I might mention also that the people who are Seattle is, we're in the richest country in the world. We're one of the richest cities in the richest country in the world. Yet we have the third highest homeless population in this country here.
Right.
And it's growing, as we've been talking about. So one thing we can do on a positive side towards speaking of solutions is getting vendors who sell real change being a customer for those people. Because a lot of people walk by them every day, and there are people in our community who represent the one of the most visible segments of this population, of the homeless population, and the side of it where they're trying to do what they can and work to get ahead a little bit. Real Change sells for $2, and vendors pay a fee to buy the papers, and then make a little bit of profit on every paper, a small amount. And their sponsorship has been going down. The number of people buying papers has been hit hard by this economic crisis, and even before the pandemic has struck, we're still they're experiencing less business. So one thing I would suggest is, if people listening see a Real Change vendor, buy a paper, please, and realize that refusing a paper doesn't seal the deal. A lot of people walk up to a Real Change vendor and might say, "No, you keep the paper. Here's a donation," and that's okay. But really what happens is in exchange for some piece of news, the newspaper, which is actually a great newspaper and has good news articles,
Right.
you take the paper and then you pay the person. You're not giving them anything for free. You're giving them something of value, and you give them something
Yes.
of value in exchange.
Yes.
So that's a complete exchange. Otherwise, it's not. The idea of is giving, and you can do that in several ways. But there's more dignity when you buy something from someone, and in the act of selling, as Real Change does, is just something I'd encourage people to do more of, a lot more of.
And is it true that some of the people that say real change here, do they get a little bit of money for that, or
Every paper sells for $2.
okay?
And they buy the papers. I think they pay 60 cents or $1 for the papers. I believe it's 60 cents. So they're making $1.40 per paper.
So
Sometimes, like, I've been with a Real Change vendor selling, and he was selling over an 8-hour period and only sold about 10 or 12 papers over
Right.
that period. So that's a profit of about $20.
for him personally,
Yes.
or for the
The newspaper gets 40
newspaper
cents
itself?
out of every sale.
Okay.
So not
So
much.
I'm just wondering because sometimes I'm in Ballard every other week, and there's a lot of people selling that, and I had heard that they were going to that the people that sell the papers actually get a piece of it. So I was
Correct.
wondering how much of a piece do they get, and what usually happens to it.
I just explained that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's just they get the they get $1.60 per paper,
Right.
and that's their profit.
Right.
Small amount of money.
And what do they do? Do they sell the paper, and if they get enough money, maybe they can get something to eat, or maybe they
Yes.
can go into
Just like anyone who
shelter
gets
or
money,
anything
they
like
get
that.
a little bit of money for it, $1,
Yeah.
something per paper.
So
I wanted to
that's
talk a
good
little
thing.
more, Mondo, about what happened with a friend of mine who
Oh,
we
yeah.
got together as a group. One of the people who knows this person suggested that he needed to have a house. He needed to
Right.
be inside because he'd been homeless for years,
Right.
more than 5 years.
Right.
And a number of us knew him because he was visible to the public on a daily basis. So we got together and met every week and formed a nonprofit organization and raised pledges from people and actually raised enough
Right.
money to pay his rent on a monthly basis.
Because you got a chance to meet him, and he's one of these gentlemen that does not have a mental disability.
No, exactly. This person is a college graduate who
Right.
was a mathematician, a librarian over his life, got diabetes as an older man, struggled to work under circumstances with his health deteriorating, ended up losing his house, losing his rental space that he was living in, and ended up living outside for a couple of years before, and then he someone gave him a van, and he lived in his van for about 5 years or more.
Oh, wow, that's a long.
So it's a long time to be outside every day, and we've been sitting out here for 15 minutes, and I'm cold, and
Wow.
I have gloves on, and I'm dressed warmly, and you do as well. But sitting outside is a cold, hard way to spend all of your time for anyone.
Especially especially when you don't have anywhere to go anywhere inside to go.
Exactly.
Or if you do, you only can be there for a certain amount of time, because that's sooner or later that somebody's going to come and say, I'm sorry, you can't be here.
Yep.
I know when I don't live too far from here, as you know, and I went into the wrong parking lot, And the guy said, "Oh no, this is for park employees." I got news for you. I've never seen an employee in this park except for when they're trying to fix something. So I would like to say, maybe you should relax on that, or because there. For all I know, you never know. I mean, somebody might be living in their car and just saying they're an employee here, so nobody will bother them. That's a little bit of a joke, but I hardly ever see employees here. And this is a good place where somebody could at least take a tent and put some kind of
I
roots
have
down
seen a
at
tent
least,
parked right over there behind the bathroom for
at
about
least
6 months.
at least for a little bit. But in reality, you can't camp here.
People have done it.
And maybe they ought to do something uh, more important about it. I know that politicians in the city have a lot of things to worry about. There's a lot of money that needs to go in certain places, but at some point there's got to be a way that we can limit the amount of tents in the city and the district, and do something to put some kind of roof over these people's heads, because it might be getting ready to become spring, but we don't know how long this nutty disease is going to be happening or be around. So
Well, I would just say
really
one
should
thing.
do something about it.
I would disagree with one thing you said and agree
Okay.
with the other.
All right.
I agree that we should be helping people find housing, because housing, even for working people, is very difficult, very expensive in Seattle.
Oh, and cut down the cost of living. That's something else.
And the thing I disagree with is that we should limit tents, and I think that especially right now, we should be a little more permissive as far as uprooting people, especially during this virus. Everybody needs somewhere to go, even if it's a tent.
Right.
And they have that's
Right.
their space. We shouldn't be, uprooting people right
Right.
now. It's just, in fact, on the way here, Mondo, I heard on the radio that the mayor and the city council have agreed that there will be no evictions over rent non-payment for 30 days.
Yes. Yes.
So that people who are in jobs that are suspended, the jobs are no longer there, and
Yeah.
they're not getting paid, so they don't get thrown out of their homes
Right.
when they might need to isolate themselves for 2 weeks, and then they get thrown out of their house. That
Right.
doesn't work.
Right, I heard about that too. Excuse me. I heard about that too on the radio about a month or so ago. They said that they were going to, even before the outbreak of the coronavirus, they made that rule, and I think it's a great rule, and they should continue that way on into the future. It would help cut down a little bit on the homeless population. And the second thing I wanted to say about limiting the tents, I just meant limit it as far as, making it so people don't have to be cold and things like that. I was trying to get them to
In somewhere.
have somewhere inside where they
I
could
see.
go and protect
Yes.
themselves better.
Yep. And I do think that the city and other officials have to figure out something about, you can't put a tent everywhere.
Yeah.
So it is something that has to be controlled, but I do think that
Yeah.
we do need to think a little more about how we might manage this rather than the way it's being done today.
Yeah,
here in the city.
I mean a place like this, I mean, you gotta get. We're sitting here in front of a gazebo at a picnic table, and it doesn't have a roof on it, but there's a lot of space here for for some tents. You know, at least a few. I'm not saying that you should fill the entire park with tents and people that live in the tents, but at least give them somewhere to go where they can protect themselves a little bit from the cold. I don't know, maybe somebody could give out some space heaters, and hopefully they won't burn their tent down. But you know, at least maybe if they had a space heater and a tent, at least they'd be comfortable in their current living spaces.
I don't know what the solution is, but
I don't know.
I know we need to have a larger discussion about it. I know when that issue of actually putting people in a park, and I think they even talked about this parking lot right here in this park.
Oh.
And what I think what happened is people came out of the woodwork who live in the neighborhood and got really upset about losing their park to the homelessness. And there was in fact a documentary done by Sinclair Broadcasting about 6 months ago now that
Right.
was very accusatory of stereotyping homeless people as those that are urinating everywhere and drunks. They're always drunks and
Right.
alcoholics, and they have no social sense, and
Well,
on and on. And that's a stereotype. As we were just talking about, there are people who are, you know, out of control and addicted to various things, and there are other people who, by circumstances, there go you or I under similar circumstances, just a flip of a coin.
Yeah.
So
I know that I have been in such of a situation where I have been, you know, maybe I have thought about living on the streets, but then I think about being cold, and then I think about what am I going to do with my charger. I got to have somewhere to plug in my charger. I got to have, it's not that great to be sitting in the chair all night, but you know, that's doable. But where am I going to park the charger? Because without the charger, I can't move the chair. And if I don't have anywhere to plug in the charger, I'm dead.
yeah.
So that's another reason why, you know, I thought about maybe it's not a good idea to go on the street. But
Well, it's a good point you're making, which
yeah.
is that people who are differently abled really struggle to deal with being outside, or any of the things that those that are normally able have an easier time with. So
we struggle in just about everything.
exactly.
I envy those that can walk and take care of themselves, because you know they can take a walk and be gone for half a day before nobody else, you know, until somebody misses them and says, where are they? Then they call the police and get them back. But you know, in a lot of places we get stuck in the woodwork. And what are you going to do if one of us gets put in a situation where we get knocked out of our house? We don't want to be put in a nursing home, because if you put us in a nursing home, then they start talking down to us worse than they do now.
Yeah.
And you know, in my case, that doesn't happen, but a lot. Well, actually, let me say it doesn't happen a lot. It does happen to me, but for some people that are in different situations, it happens all the time, and it's time to make sure that, you know, let's not forget about us either, because
Good point.
what happens if you kick the person in the wheelchair out of their house. And, you know, I mean, I'm sure at first a lot of us would want to be put on the streets, but what are you going to do? Everybody feels bad for people that live in tents and can walk around and take care of themselves, but what are you going to do if they end up not being in the same situation? You're going to put them in a nursing home? You know,
Well, I think what we're talking about here is we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Is the idea that we really, as a whole society, certainly our immediate community, needs to have a discussion about how to handle these very important problems, because we're
and
not
actually
talking about
take care of them.
because
Don't
we're not
talk
talking about
it.
when we talk about homeless or disabled people, it sounds like it's some amorphous group of people.
Yeah.
But when I'm talking to you and we're talking about a person we know who's got a house, who was homeless for years, that's doing something that really helps a human being. And really that's the message I wanted to give in coming on today. Was my participation in this show was to just say to people, don't give money to a national cause as your sole way of participating, but instead, you know, think about what you can do in your community with someone who you can help.
Right. So we got about 30 seconds. So I want to thank Dennis for coming and talking about this and getting it out there. And I want to thank you guys for listening to us. And if you want to listen to my show, you can listen to it 10 o'clock on Monday mornings and 3 o'clock Friday afternoons. And we'll see you next time on Mondo's World. And we'll have hopefully a much more entertaining and exciting show for Mondo's World next year. This is Mondo, and we'll talk to you later on Mondo's World. Just in time. Oops. Sorry.